Imagine standing in a crowd of thousands, your heart shattered into a million pieces, carrying a weight so heavy that every breath feels like climbing a mountain. Now imagine that in your darkest moment, when grief has wrapped itself around you like a suffocating blanket, a complete stranger sees you, truly sees you, and stops everything to remind you that you're not alone. This isn't just a story about a concert being interrupted. This is a story about humanity, about the moment when fame took a back seat to compassion, when a superstar proved that sometimes the most powerful performance isn't the one you planned, but the one your heart demands. This is the story of how Pink stopped time for a 14-year-old girl named Leah, and in doing so, reminded an entire arena, and eventually the world, what it really means to be human. The year was 2018, and the city of Brisbane, Australia, was electric with anticipation. The entertainment centre was packed wall to wall with fans who had waited months, maybe years, for this night. Pink, the powerhouse vocalist known for her death-defying aerial performances, her raw vulnerability in lyrics, and her refusal to conform to industry standards, was in town as part of her beautiful Trauma World Tour. This wasn't just any concert series. This was Pink at the peak of her powers, delivering night after night of spectacular shows that combined athletic prowess with emotional depth. Fans arrived hours early, dressed in their best concert attire, some with elaborate costumes paying homage to their idols' various eras. The merchandise stands were mobbed, the energy was palpable, and as the lights began to dim, the roar of the crowd could probably be heard blocks away. Everyone in that arena had their own reasons for being there. Some were lifelong fans who had grown up with Pink's music as the soundtrack to their lives. Others were new converts, drawn in by viral videos of her incredible performances. Parents brought their children to show them what a real artist looks like. Friends gathered to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, or simply the joy of being alive and sharing music together. But in the middle of all that excitement, all that joy and anticipation, there was one young girl who was there for an entirely different reason. 14-year-old Leah Murphy was standing somewhere in that sea of faces, but she wasn't screaming with excitement. She wasn't dancing or singing along to the opening acts. She was there because her mother, just days before, had made her promise something. Leah's mother had been battling cancer, a cruel disease that had stolen her strength bit by bit, day by day. In those final precious moments together, when words become sacred and every conversation might be the last, Leah's mother had looked at her daughter with all the love a parent can hold and asked her to do something that must have seemed impossible. She asked Leah to go to the Pink concert, to go even after she was gone, to go and live and experience joy even in the midst of unbearable sorrow. It's hard to imagine what that request must have cost that dying mother, knowing she was asking her child to face the world without her, to step into a space of celebration while drowning in grief. But perhaps she knew something that only parents can know. Perhaps she understood that grief has a way of freezing us in place, of making us believe that if we don't move forward, if we stay perfectly still, maybe the loss won't be real. Maybe she knew that her daughter needed permission to keep living, even when part of her had died too. So Leah came to the concert, carrying her mother's dying wish like a fragile treasure, her heart simultaneously broken and bursting with love. As Pink took the stage, the arena exploded with sound. The opening notes of the first song rang out, and thousands of voices joined together in that transcendent experience that only live music can create. Pink was in her element, commanding the stage with that unique combination of vulnerability and fierce strength that had made her one of the most beloved artists of her generation. Song after song, she delivered the kind of performance that reminds you why live music matters, why we gather together in darkened rooms to share in the collective experience of art. She flew through the air with the grace of a circus performer. She belted out notes that seemed to shake the rafters, and she connected with her audience in that ineffable way that separates true artists from mere entertainers. But then, somewhere in the middle of the show, something shifted. Pink's gaze swept across the crowd, and in that vast ocean of faces, something caught her attention. Maybe it was the way one girl stood perfectly still while everyone around her moved. Maybe it was the sign that Leah was holding, a sign that told a story no one should have to tell. Maybe it was simply that mysterious intuition that sometimes allows us to recognize pain even from a distance. Whatever it was, Pink saw Leah, and in that moment, the superstar made a decision that would ripple far beyond that single night in Brisbane. The music didn't stop immediately. Pink continued with the song, but you could see her focus had shifted. She was still singing, still performing, but part of her attention was locked on this one girl in the crowd. When the song ended, instead of launching into the next number, instead of keeping the momentum going as any professional performer would do, Pink did something unexpected. She stopped. She stopped the entire concert, tens of thousands of people waiting in suspense, and she began to talk about what she had just seen. Her voice, usually so powerful and confident, carried a different quality now, something softer, more tender. She told the crowd about the girl she had spotted, about the sign that had caught her eye, about the story of a daughter who had just lost her mother and was here because of a dying wish. The massive arena, which moments before had been thundering with music and excitement, fell into a hushed, sacred silence. In that moment, every single person in that building understood that they were witnessing something far more important than entertainment. They were witnessing love, loss, and the incredible courage it takes to keep showing up even when your world has shattered. Pink didn't just acknowledge Leah from the stage. She didn't just offer condolences from a safe distance, separated by security barriers and the buffer of stardom. Instead, she made her way down to where Leah was standing. Security personnel quickly moved to create a path, and the cameras that had been capturing the concert now focused on this unexpected moment of raw humanity. As Pink approached, you could see Leah's face, a mixture of disbelief, grief, and overwhelming emotion. Here was this girl who had been trying to hold herself together, trying to honor her mother's wish by being here, by being brave, and suddenly the barrier between performer and audience dissolved completely. Pink reached Leah and, without hesitation, without the awkwardness that sometimes accompanies public displays of emotion, she wrapped her arms around this grieving teenager and held her. Not a quick hug for the cameras, not a performative gesture, but a real, genuine embrace. The kind of hug that says, "I see your pain, I acknowledge your loss, you're not invisible, you matter." The cameras captured everything, and in those images that would soon travel around the world, you can see the transformation. You can see Leah's body language shift from rigid grief to something softer, something that looks like relief. You can see Pink whispering to her, words that were just for Leah, not for the cameras or the crowd. You can see thousands of people in the background, many of them crying, all of them bearing witness to this moment of genuine human connection. In an age where so much of celebrity culture feels manufactured, where interactions between stars and fans are often carefully controlled and choreographed, this was something else entirely. This was real. This was a woman who happened to be famous, making the conscious choice to prioritize one person's pain over the momentum of a show, over the expectations of thousands, over the carefully planned production that had taken months to prepare. And in making that choice, Pink gave everyone in that arena, and everyone who would later see the footage, permission to prioritize compassion over convenience, humanity over schedule, connection over performance. The moment lasted several minutes, though time seemed to move differently in that space. Pink continued to hold Leah, to talk to her, to be fully present with this stranger's grief in a way that most of us struggle to do even with people we know well. When they finally separated, Pink looked into Leah's eyes and said something that made the teenager smile through her tears, a flash of light in the darkness. Then, before returning to the stage, Pink did something else remarkable. She took the time to acknowledge the rest of the crowd, to thank them for their patience, to recognize that they too were now part of this moment. And the response from the audience wasn't frustration at the interruption or impatience to get back to the show. It was thunderous applause, cheers of support, a collective outpouring of love not just for Pink, but for Leah, for the sacred space that had just been created, for the reminder that we are all connected by our shared humanity, our shared capacity to hurt and to heal. When Pink returned to the stage and the concert resumed, something had fundamentally changed in that arena. The energy was different now, deeper somehow. Every song that followed seemed to carry more weight, more meaning. When Pink sang about pain, everyone felt it more acutely. When she sang about resilience, about getting back up after being knocked down, about finding strength you didn't know you had, the words landed differently. The audience wasn't just watching a performance anymore. They were sharing in a collective experience of emotional truth. This is what art is supposed to do, to crack us open, to make us feel, to remind us what it means to be alive. But it usually happens through the songs themselves, through the poetry of lyrics and the power of melody. This time, it happened through a simple act of human kindness, and it transformed everything that followed. The story didn't end when the concert did. In our hyperconnected age, where everyone has a camera in their pocket and moments can become movements in minutes, footage of Pink's interaction with Leah began spreading almost immediately. Concertgoers posted videos to their social media accounts, and within hours, the story had gone viral. Not viral in the empty way that so many things do, where we share without thinking and scroll without feeling. This was different. People stopped scrolling. They watched the videos multiple times. They shared them with comments about their own losses, their own grief, their own moments of unexpected kindness that had saved them. The story was picked up by media outlets around the world. People magazine, one of the most widely read publications in America, featured the story prominently. The Huffington Post, known for its coverage of human interest stories that matter, gave it significant attention. News outlets in Australia, where it had happened, treated it as a major story, interviewing people who had been in the arena that night, capturing their reflections on what they had witnessed. But the story's reach extended far beyond traditional media. It spread through the organic, unstoppable force of people genuinely moved by something they had seen, desperate to share it with others. What made this story resonate so powerfully? Why did it capture the attention and hearts of millions of people around the world? On the surface, it's a simple story. A famous person was kind to a fan. That's not entirely uncommon. Many celebrities have moments where they go out of their way to connect with their audience. But there was something about this particular moment, this particular choice, that struck a deeper chord. Perhaps it was the timing, coming at a moment in history when our discourse had become increasingly harsh, when social media had amplified our worst impulses, when it often seemed like empathy was in short supply. Perhaps it was the universality of the experience, the recognition that every single person watching had either experienced profound loss themselves or loved someone who had, and they understood exactly what Leah was feeling. Perhaps it was the authenticity of it, the clear sense that this wasn't a publicity stunt or a calculated move, but a genuine impulse of compassion that Pink couldn't ignore even when it disrupted her carefully planned show. Or perhaps it was the reminder of something we all desperately need to remember, that in a world that often feels too big, too complicated, too overwhelming, individual acts of kindness still matter, still have the power to change lives, still represent the best of what we can be. The impact on Leah herself is something that's harder to quantify, but no less significant. In interviews that followed, she spoke about that night with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. She described how she had felt invisible in her grief, how the world had seemed to continue spinning while her own world had stopped completely. She talked about the isolation that comes with loss, especially at 14, an age when you're not quite a child but not yet an adult, when grief can feel like a foreign country where you don't speak the language. She explained that her mother had been not just a parent but a best friend, a constant presence, the person who understood her completely. Losing that felt like losing a part of herself. Going to the concert had been an act of almost unbearable bravery, showing up to a place of joy when joy felt impossible. She had expected to simply be there, to fulfill her promise to her mother, to maybe find a few moments of escape in the music. She never expected to be seen. She never expected that her pain would matter to anyone beyond her immediate circle of family and friends. And then Pink stopped the entire world for her. In that embrace, in those whispered words of comfort, in the acknowledgement that her loss mattered, Leah found something she didn't even know she was looking for. Not closure, because grief doesn't work that way. Not an end to the pain, because that's not possible. But validation. Recognition. A reminder that she wasn't alone, that her mother's love continued to ripple outward even in death, bringing her to this moment where a stranger would hold her and tell her, without words, that she would survive this, that life would continue, that love doesn't end just because someone dies. For Pink, this moment was consistent with who she has always been as an artist and as a person. Throughout her career, she has been outspoken about her own struggles, her own pain, her own journey through mental health challenges, relationship difficulties, and the complex terrain of being a woman in the music industry. She has never hidden behind a carefully crafted persona. Instead, she has consistently chosen authenticity, using her platform to speak about things that matter, to challenge injustice, to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Her songs often deal with themes of resilience, of overcoming adversity, of refusing to let the world diminish you. Titles like Perfect, Fucking Perfect, Try, and Beam Me Up showcase an artist who isn't afraid to explore the darker corners of human experience. So when she saw Leah in that crowd, when she recognized that pain, stopping the concert wasn't a departure from who she is. It was the most Pink thing she could possibly do. It was the living embodiment of everything her music has always said, that we matter, that our pain is valid, that we have value beyond what we produce or how we perform, that sometimes the most radical act is simply to stop and pay attention to someone who is hurting. The response from other artists and public figures was illuminating. Many took to social media to praise Pink for her actions, to share their own similar experiences either of being helped in moments of crisis or of stopping to help others. Some used the moment to reflect on the responsibility that comes with fame, the platform it provides not just for entertainment, but for modeling the kind of behavior we need more of in the world. Others saw it as a challenge, a reminder that we don't have to be famous to make these kinds of choices, that every single day we are presented with opportunities to see people's pain and respond with compassion, and that most of the time we're too busy, too distracted, or too focused on our own agendas to stop. Pink's decision to interrupt her concert became a kind of mirror held up to society, asking us what we value, what we prioritize, what we consider important enough to stop for. In a culture that often seems to worship efficiency, productivity, and staying on schedule, here was a moment that said sometimes the most important thing you can do is throw out the plan and respond to what's right in front of you. The conversation that emerged from this event touched on larger themes about mental health, grief, and the ways we support people who are struggling. Grief, particularly in Western cultures, is something we're often uncomfortable with. We want it to follow a timeline, to happen discreetly, to resolve itself quickly, so we can all get back to normal. We have a few days of bereavement leave, we send flowers, we say we're sorry for your loss, and then we expect people to move on. But anyone who has experienced profound loss knows that it doesn't work that way. Grief is not linear. It doesn't follow a schedule. It comes in waves, unexpected and overwhelming, triggered by songs on the radio, by empty chairs at the dinner table, by holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays that suddenly feel unbearable. And while we're carrying this grief, the world expects us to function, to show up, to perform our roles as students, employees, parents, friends. The pressure to appear okay, to not burden others with our pain, can be immense. Leah's presence at that concert, her decision to show up even in the depths of her grief, represented the reality that so many people live every day, carrying invisible wounds while trying to participate in a world that has little patience for pain. Pink's response acknowledged that reality, created space for it, validated it in a way that our culture desperately needs. The discussion also highlighted the power of public figures to shape cultural conversations. Whether we like it or not, celebrities have outsized influence on public discourse. Their actions, their choices, their words reach millions of people and can shift perspectives, change behaviors, and model new ways of being in the world. When a celebrity uses their platform thoughtfully, as Pink did in this moment, the impact can be profound. How many people in that arena, or watching the videos later, were inspired to be more attentive to the pain of others? How many people decided to check in on a grieving friend they had been avoiding because they didn't know what to say? How many parents talked to their children about empathy and compassion using this story as an example? How many people experiencing their own grief felt less alone, felt seen, felt validated in their pain because they watched Pink stop a concert to acknowledge that someone was hurting? These ripple effects are impossible to measure, but undeniably real. One moment of genuine humanity, captured on camera and shared around the world, becomes a kind of permission slip for all of us to prioritize people over productivity, connection over convenience, compassion over comfort. This moment also speaks to something important about the relationship between artists and their audiences. At its best, this relationship is not transactional. It's not simply about an exchange of money for entertainment. It's about connection, about the ways that art helps us make sense of our lives, process our emotions, and feel less alone in our experiences. Great artists understand this. They know that people don't just come to concerts to hear songs they could listen to at home. They come for the shared experience, for the energy of being in a room with thousands of other people who love the same music, for the possibility of transcendence, for the chance that something might happen that breaks through the ordinary and touches something deeper. Pink's decision to stop the concert and embrace Leah was an acknowledgement of this deeper purpose. It was a recognition that in that moment, the most important thing she could do for her audience wasn't to entertain them, but to show them what it looks like to be fully human, to respond with compassion, to prioritize someone's well-being over the show. And in doing so, she gave her audience a gift far more valuable than any performance could provide. She gave them a memory of genuine human goodness, a story they would tell for years, a moment that would stay with them and perhaps influence how they move through the world. For those who study communication, psychology, and human behavior, this moment offers rich material for analysis. There's something to be said about nonverbal communication, about the way a hug can convey what words cannot. There's the power of acknowledgement, the way being seen in our pain can itself be healing. There's the concept of social modeling, where witnessing acts of kindness increases the likelihood that we'll perform similar acts ourselves. There's the role of mirror neurons, the way our brains light up when we watch others experience emotion, allowing us to literally feel what they're feeling. All of these factors came together in that arena in Brisbane, creating a moment that was simultaneously intimate and universal, personal and collective. It demonstrated that even in our age of digital connection and social media saturation, we are still fundamentally wired for face-to-face interaction, for physical presence, for the kind of authentic connection that can only happen when we stop multitasking and give someone our full attention. The story also raises interesting questions about sacrifice and priority. Pink had a contractual obligation to perform that concert. There were thousands of people who had paid significant money for tickets, who had made travel arrangements, who had expectations about what they would experience. There was a production crew whose timing and cues depended on the show progressing as planned. There were venue managers, tour managers, and countless others whose jobs revolved around keeping things on schedule. In stopping the concert, Pink was in some sense putting all of that at risk. What if the audience had responded with frustration instead of support? What if the moment had fallen flat, seemed forced or awkward? What if it had thrown off the entire rest of the show, causing technical difficulties or timing problems? These were all possibilities, and yet Pink decided that none of them mattered more than responding to Leah's pain. This willingness to potentially sacrifice the smooth execution of a professional obligation for the sake of human connection is increasingly rare in our world. We are so often told that the show must go on, that personal feelings should be set aside in favor of professional responsibilities, that maintaining the schedule is paramount. Pink's choice represented a different set of values, a different hierarchy of importance. It said that people matter more than plans, that compassion trumps convenience, that sometimes the most professional thing you can do is to be human first and a performer second. The media coverage of the event, while overwhelmingly positive, also sparked some interesting conversations about the nature of privacy and public grief. Some commentators questioned whether it was appropriate to film and share such an intimate moment, whether Leah's grief was being commodified or exploited for clicks and views. These are valid concerns in an age where every moment seems to be documented and shared, where the line between what is public and what is private has become increasingly blurred. However, most people, including Leah herself, seemed to feel that the sharing of this moment served a positive purpose. It wasn't shared in a mocking or judgmental way. It wasn't used to diminish or mock Leah's pain. Instead, it became a story that inspired millions, that opened conversations about grief and loss, that reminded people of the importance of compassion. Leah, in interviews, expressed gratitude that her story had resonated with so many people, that her mother's dying wish had led to a moment that touched hearts around the world. In sharing her grief, she found that she wasn't alone, that countless others reached out with their own stories, their own losses, their own moments of unexpected kindness that had helped them survive. So while we should always be thoughtful about what we share and why, this particular instance seemed to justify the publicity, seemed to serve a greater good that outweighed concerns about privacy. As time passed and the immediate viral moment faded, the story settled into a different kind of significance. It became one of those cultural touchstones that people reference when talking about celebrity culture, about the power of kindness, about what it means to be an artist who truly connects with their audience. Music journalists writing retrospectives about Pink's career invariably include this moment as a defining one, illustrative of who she is and what she represents. Fans discussing why they love Pink don't just talk about her vocal ability or her acrobatic performances. They talk about Brisbane, about Leah, about the night she stopped the show. It has become part of Pink's legacy, perhaps as much as any of her hit songs or award-winning albums. And that legacy matters because it represents something that transcends entertainment. It represents the possibility of fame being used for good, of celebrity being harnessed not for ego or profit but for genuine human connection. For Leah, life continued after that night, as it must. The grief didn't disappear because Pink hugged her. The loss didn't become any less profound. Her mother was still gone, and every day brought new reminders of that absence. But something had shifted. In honoring her mother's wish, in going to that concert, in being seen and held and validated in her pain, Leah had received a gift. Not a gift that erased the grief, but a gift that made it more bearable. She had a story now, a memory of kindness that could serve as a life raft in the darkest moments. She knew, in a deep and personal way, that compassion exists, that strangers can care, that the world contains goodness even in the midst of terrible loss. In interviews conducted in the months and years that followed, Leah spoke about how that moment changed her, how it taught her to be more open about her pain, how it inspired her to look for opportunities to offer kindness to others who were struggling. Her mother's legacy, which might have been confined to family memories and private grief, had expanded to include this public moment of connection, this story that would be told and retold, inspiring others long after both Leah and Pink are gone. The Beautiful Trauma World Tour continued after Brisbane, traveling to cities around the globe, playing to sold-out arenas night after night. But for those who were in Brisbane that evening, for those who witnessed what happened between Pink and Leah, those other shows could never quite compare. They had been present for something unrepeatable, something that transcended the typical concert experience. They had seen an artist make a choice that prioritized humanity over spectacle, that valued one person's pain over the entertainment of thousands. And in witnessing that choice, they had been given something rare and precious, a reminder of what we're capable of when we pay attention, when we care, when we allow compassion to interrupt our carefully laid plans. Many of them described it as a life-changing experience, not because of the music, though the music was excellent, but because of that unscripted moment when everything stopped and all that mattered was one grieving girl and one compassionate woman, and the space they created together. In the years since that night in Brisbane, the world has continued to spin, to change, to present us with new challenges and crises. We've faced global pandemics, political upheavals, climate disasters, and countless personal tragedies. The need for compassion, for human connection, for the willingness to stop and see each other's pain has only increased. And in those moments when we wonder if kindness matters, if individual actions can make a difference in the face of overwhelming pain, the story of Pink and Leah offers an answer. Yes. Yes, it matters. Yes, stopping for one person matters. Yes, acknowledgement and compassion and the willingness to disrupt our plans for the sake of someone who is hurting, yes, all of that matters profoundly. Not because it solves everything, not because it erases grief or fixes broken systems or prevents future tragedies, but because it reminds us who we are, who we can be, what we're capable of when we choose connection over convenience. This story endures because it represents something essential about the human experience. We all carry pain. We all face loss. We all have moments when we feel invisible, when we wonder if anyone sees us, if anyone cares, if our suffering matters to anyone beyond ourselves. And in those moments, an act of recognition, of compassion, of genuine human connection can be everything. It can be the thing that gets us through another day. It can be the memory we hold on to when everything else feels dark. It can be the proof we need that despite all the evidence to the contrary, the world contains goodness, people care, love persists even in the face of death. Pink's decision to stop her concert, to climb down from the stage, to hold a grieving teenager and whisper words of comfort, was a small act in the grand scheme of things. It didn't solve any major world problems. It didn't change policy or cure disease or prevent suffering. But for Leah in that moment, it was everything. And for the thousands who witnessed it, and the millions who saw it later, it was a gift, a reminder, a challenge, and an inspiration. As we move through our own lives, facing our own losses and challenges, carrying our own invisible wounds, we have choices to make every single day. We can stay focused on our schedules, our obligations, our carefully constructed plans. We can prioritize efficiency and productivity and keeping everything running smoothly. There's a place for that, of course. The world needs structure and organization, and people who keep things on track. But we can also choose to notice. We can choose to see the pain that others are carrying. We can choose to stop, to reach out, to offer comfort, to create space for someone else's grief or struggle or fear. We can choose to let compassion interrupt our plans, to prioritize people over productivity, to remember that we are all connected by our shared humanity, our shared vulnerability, our shared need to be seen and heard and valued. Pink's moment with Leah wasn't special because Pink is famous. It was special because it was human, and that humanity is available to all of us, every single day, if we're willing to pay attention, to care, and to act on that caring even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable or disruptive to our plans. The story of Pink stopping her concert for a grieving teen is ultimately a story about love. Love between a mother and daughter, so strong that even death couldn't break it, so powerful that it brought Leah to a concert when grief would have kept most people home. Love between an artist and her fans, a recognition that the relationship goes beyond entertainment into something deeper and more meaningful. Love in its most universal sense, the kind of love that sees suffering and cannot walk past it, that recognizes our fundamental obligation to each other as fellow human beings struggling through this complex, painful, beautiful existence. This kind of love doesn't make headlines every day. It often happens in quiet moments, in small gestures, in choices that no one but the people involved will ever know about. But when it does happen publicly, when it's captured on camera and shared around the world, it serves as a powerful reminder of what we're capable of, what we should aspire to, what the world could look like if more of us made these choices more often. So the next time you're moving through your day, focused on your agenda, your schedule, your list of things that need to be accomplished, I invite you to remember Brisbane. Remember Pink and Leah. Remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do, the thing that will matter more than anything else you had planned, is to stop. Stop and see someone. Stop and acknowledge their pain. Stop and offer whatever comfort you can, even if it's just a moment of recognition, a genuine "I see you, I'm sorry you're hurting, you're not alone." Because that's what this story is really about. Not about a concert or a celebrity or a viral moment, but about the fundamental truth that we need each other, that compassion is not a luxury but a necessity, that in our darkest moments, being seen can be the thing that saves us. Pink saw Leah. She stopped everything to acknowledge that seeing. And in doing so, she gave us all a gift, a roadmap, a challenge, and a hope. The hope that even in our darkest moments, even when grief threatens to swallow us whole, even when we feel invisible and alone, there might be someone who will stop, who will see us, who will remind us through their actions that we matter, that our pain matters, that love is stronger than death, and that we are never truly alone as long as we continue to choose connection over isolation, compassion over indifference, humanity over everything else.